So welcome everybody to the Embrace Life Project. This is graduation week, week 4, and today we're going to be talking about making change, building community based on passion and purpose. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of the session. Of course, as always, we'll have a presentation that lasts about 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in that range. We'll dismiss about 3 o'clock, 3:15. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then if you can stick around for the post session and some Q&A, and we'll talk all about all the different topics we've covered and have a chance to wrap up with a post session discussion. Of course, as always, we want to thank the United Church of Christ in Simi Valley. And if you're looking for a church home that allows you to ask as many questions as you want and be your full and total self, then the United Church of Christ is a great place for you. But no matter what faith you are or no faith in particular, we certainly welcome you, and you are welcome here. Oh my, we have been through an ordeal, haven't we? When you think about past over a year and a half, it reminds me of why we did this project. We've all been through so much. We had our entire world turned upside down. And you look at a place like India now, oh my goodness, and they're just in the thick of it when we're starting to think about maybe coming out on the other side of COVID. I wanted to just take a minute before we start to just have a moment of silence, just for everything we've all been through, for all the lives that have been lost, for all the lives that have been destroyed, and with thanks for everybody who has been on the front lines, to everybody who has worked to stop the spread of this pandemic. Let's take just a moment. You know, when we come out of this, it's to be expected that we're going to have a little bit of a shock to the system. We've been away from each other for a long time. We're going to have to get used to being around each other again. And that's why we started this Embrace Life project, because we wanted to sort of prep ourselves. And over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about this dichotomy of separation and connection. So during this pandemic, we've been really living through a dark night of the soul. We've been experiencing a lot of separation. So in week 1, when we talked about fractured consciousness, you know, we could probably really relate. We've been dealing with this pain of separation. What we did week 1 is we talked about that's how the universe functions. It functions in its separateness and its connectedness. And we talked about ways that we could practice our awareness of that separateness and our connectedness. And to illustrate that, we did a little mini project of talking and listening. Then in week 2, we talked about tuning in. We started to work on building our own personal spiritual practice, practicing our connection, and in some cases, detachment, things that we need to unattach from or to detach from. We use the art of spiritual practice to repair fractures that exist within ourselves and with others and with the infinite oneness or God. And one of the projects we took on, and that at the end of that was we practiced a higher self visualization. Then there was week 3. We talked about our passion and pain, things that bring us joy and things that still bring us sorrow. We used our awareness of separation and connectedness to move away from living these reactionary lives where we're always waiting for stuff to happen, and then we'll decide. We let the stuff that happens determine who we are and how we respond. But we said through understanding our passion and our pain, our joy and our sorrow, and how they relate to each other, we can live our life based on passion and purpose, not just based on whatever happens to come our way that day. So that brings us to week 4. And I'm going to ask you a question to begin the lecture in week 4. And here's the question I'm going to ask you, and please have your chat fingers at the ready here. What's the first thing you're going to do? When all the restrictions are lifted, you don't have to wear your mask anymore, we return to a social life of some kind. Think about it for just a moment. What are you looking forward to? What's the first thing you want to do when all that's possible again? I know a lot of people have said they want to go to a concert. Is one of the first things. They want to go out and experience music, live music together. So today, we're going to be talking about making change, all these things that we've been learning about. And we're going to start to build community with passion and purpose. So the bottom line question for today is, how is it that we can make a difference? And my answer to that is going to be this. We make a difference by embracing life from the inside out. Jill says she's going to travel. Oh, yes, I can relate to that. Stacy as well. Yeah, I'm so ready to travel. I'm getting a bug. Yeah. So we're going to get back to it by embracing life from the inside out. Let's unpack what that means a little bit. We're going to talk about 3 steps to making a difference. Number 1, we touched on last week. It's own your stuff. Number 2 is open up. And number 3 is find your mission. If you're a fan of acronyms, you can remember it by OOF. Right? I like that. OOF. Own your stuff, open up, find your mission. First of all, owning our stuff. We talked about that last week. You remember we looked at this verse from Matthew 25 that says, "For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." And what I said was, when we own our stuff, when we have it, when we possess it, like if we possess our joy, we can then access more joy. Now, I'm not saying if we own and possess our pain, that we'll be given more pain. That would be hardly a system that I would want to work in. But if we own our pain, it then transforms into something else. Our pain becomes a tool that we can use to help influence the world around us and to help others heal from some of the same stuff that we've suffered with. So there's an abundance there as well. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the second part that says, whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken away from them. And when I look at that verse, I think of this. If I really enjoy being around people, if I really enjoy travel, but I'm not really aware of it, I just go through the motions one day to the next. I get on the airplane and I complain, they're making me wear a mask, and why don't they have food, and all this sort of things that you can find all these reasons to be upset about travel. And here's something you enjoy that's now been taken from you. You now no longer enjoy it because you don't have it. You're not experiencing all the facets of it. I'm not saying if you go on a travel experience and something bad happens, you should not. Perfect people wouldn't get upset about that. No, I'm saying that we use our tools that we've been practicing to understand, to acknowledge that and say, hey, something difficult. I really need a bottle of water and they're not giving it to me on this flight. That can be a reason to be upset. But then we remind ourselves, do you know what? I'm just so glad to be on the road again. I'm just so glad to be out and about again. We balance it. Because if we don't have it, if we don't possess it, then the joy of what we're doing will be taken from us. So that's one way to think about it. But we've done a lot of interesting experiments, a lot of examining during this time. We spent some time in visualization, using our imagination, exploring our potential. Then I made a sample list to show that. We also took some time to kind of recognize our reality. So we had this connection between what we imagine life to be, what our potential is, and what our life actually is in the present moment. And we talked about the tension between those two things. And then we talked about passion and pain, our joy and sorrow, and the tension between those two things. And that sometimes we can find something that brings us joy, that helps us unlock something that still brings us pain. So why did I go down this little memory lane with you? Because I want to establish something for this last meeting. I wanted to spend 3 weeks really having us consider what it's like to be a fractured self, what I'm terming a fractured self, or a connected self. And here's kind of what it looks like. You knew this diagram was going to make one more appearance. I love my numbers, 0, 1, and 2. So this is no exception. So as we look at this in a state of fractured consciousness, right, we put up a lot of barriers. So if we think about the 0 as the greater whole, as all that is, the infinite oneness, it can be represented, as we talked about spiritual practice, we said the 0 kind of represents the great everything, our source of inspiration, imagination, potential, that everything is potential, right? And then the 1 being ourselves in our reality, we reach from this pool of potential and bring it down here into the real world. So if I'm thinking, before I ever go to get an iced coffee, I'm thinking in my head of all the potential beverages that I could have. And I think, oh my gosh, you know what I want? An iced coffee. And I take that, what is potential, and bring it into reality. And the same for the 1 and the 2, to self and other, right? A lot of times we can tend to hold in because there's a blockage there. There's a fracture between ourself and others. Something is causing us either to isolate completely or to be so involved with the world around us that we're never really taking time to self-reflect. So fractured consciousness means that this natural flow of the universe, this connectedness, starts to be interrupted. And I can tell you, as someone who I shared with last week, as I shared last week, I really suffered with depression. And there was all these blockages. Because if you've ever met someone who's going through a really difficult time, maybe they're struggling through a divorce or a loss of a loved one, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but a lot of times what happens is you're going through such an ordeal that your focus becomes internal. It becomes fixated on what is happening right there to you in that moment. And what happens is it blocks you from the outside world. It creates you to be sort of self-centered, self-focused. Again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you do need to get by yourself and recover from these awful things that happen. But in the wider picture of things throughout the whole of our lives, if we let that unchecked, it could create a boundary between us and the outside world. It can build a wall between us and our potential. It's kind of what I wanted to illustrate with the fractured consciousness. But when we live in a life of open and connected consciousness, when we reconnect to our infinite source, when we reconnect to the world that's around us, then we restore the natural flow of the universe. This all this. Now we have the freedom to receive energy from our inspiration and bring it through us and distribute it to sort of the world around us. Then we're free to have the influence of the outside world, the relationships that we have, the energies that are coming in from the outside world. We're both positive and negative. We're able to receive those and understand them and process them. It's a much different life, a life of awareness, of connected consciousness. It's a different life in this way. When you're fractured, you have an unexamined life, you have unresolved pain, and you have unexplored joy. And as we were talking about, a lot of times that can lead to a fear of connection. It's a fear of connection to your internal world and a fear of connection to the external world. Sometimes the very thing that we need to look at, the very thing that we need to examine in our lives is the thing we avoid. And when we avoid it, it tends to produce all these unwanted side effects. We'll talk about anything in the world except for what's really bugging us. And that leads to a lot of really unhealthy behaviors. It increases the amount of fracturing in our lives rather than healing it. But if you're a connected self, if you're an examined self, then you have an acknowledged life, an acknowledged pain, and an acknowledged joy. And notice I didn't say resolved pain. I said the fractured self is unresolved pain. But I said the connected self is acknowledged pain. Because I'm not saying that in a 1-hour lecture that I'm going to fix everything that hurts inside of you. That's not going to happen. I wish it could, but that's not how it works. But we can at least acknowledge, we can look at the skeletons in our closet. We can look at those things that we've ignored our whole life and begin to have a conversation with them and begin to make peace with them. And you will find as we continue to do these things, if we acknowledge the things that bring us joy, acknowledge the thing that brings us sorrow, you'll find that you're living finally in your own skin, in your own life. And that's what I call the connected self. And that leads to embracing our connection to our inner world. When we heal those internal fractures, when we're embracing our connection to the external world, we're feeling good about us. So now we can think about what is it we want to do in the world? How is it we want to influence the people around us? How do we want to connect when we're able to be out and about again? How is it that we're going to establish this connection to the external world, right? So now that we've owned our stuff, we've spent 3 weeks owning our stuff, we're going to cram the last 2 points and into the last part of this webinar. The next step is to open up. Literally and figuratively, we're trying to look to open up in the sense of bringing an end to COVID. And then we want to open up to each other. Here's an interesting quote I saw by an award-winning author and activist called L.R. Nost. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And she writes, "Tell your story, shout it, write it, whisper it if you have to, but tell it. Some won't understand it. Some will outright reject it, but many will thank you for it. And then the most magical thing will happen. One by one, voices will start whispering, 'Me too.' And your tribe will gather, and you will never feel alone again." Boy, this author says a lot of really true things all in one paragraph. True. We must open up. We must tell our story. But I want you to know in advance, in the age of social media, some people are going to reject it. We have to make our peace with that. We have to know that everyone will not applaud our honesty and our truth. But no, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people and lots of people who've experienced the same thing and can resonate with your story. Yes, there are some really mean-spirited people out there. You know why? Because they live the unexamined life. They're coming at you because they're not happy with that. And as people who are happy with ourselves, as people who have acknowledged pain and acknowledged sorrows, we can begin to build our confidence. And we know going into it, yeah, I'm going to open up. Not everybody's going to understand it. Not everybody's going to embrace it. But there are people out there who need to hear what I have to say, and it will help them. And they will not feel alone anymore. You begin to find your tribe. And notice she uses the phrase, and I'm not aware of whether or not this particular author was referring to the Me Too movement, but she does say, one by one, voices will start whispering, me too. And I began thinking about that phrase, and I went to the website and looked into the origins of the Me Too movement. I wasn't 100% sure how that all started. So I went and found this little description from the MeTooMovement.org site. And they tell their origin story this way. In 2006, the Me Too movement was founded by survivor and activist Tarana Burke. In those early years, we developed our vision to bring resources, support, and pathways to healing where none existed before. And we got to work building a community of advocates determined to interrupt sexual violence wherever it happens. Now, Tarana Burke, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Tarana Burke, when she came forward and told her story about the sexual violence that had occurred in her life, and that took so much courage and bravery to be the one to stand up and say, you know what, no more of this. I'm willing to take all the heat. Because this cannot go on anymore. I'm going to stand up and say something. And that's in 2006. 9 years later, it created a movement. The Me Too hashtag went viral in 2017 and woke up the world to the magnitude of the problem of sexual violence. What had begun as local grassroots work had now become a global movement seemingly overnight because one person came forward and told a story that was hard to tell. And it changed, it began a conversation and brought something that has been hidden under the carpet for so long, sexual abuse and sexual violence, and it brought it out into the open, into the light of day, where we could have an honest conversation about it for once, because one person had the courage to tell their story. Now we look at our lists that we made last week. I asked you to make lists of your joy and your sorrow, your passion and pain list. And you look at everything on that list. This is, of course, an example list, but you can look at your list and every one of those categories, no matter how small it may seem or no matter how daunting it may seem, there's a story in each one of those items. There's a topic. There's a community that either exists or can be built around that particular topic. So let's take one and just see how this unpacks. I picked from the list of pain we talked about, financial struggles. We can't make ends meet. A lot of people face that, particularly during the time of COVID. So how can we involve ourselves in community around not being able to make ends meet? Well, I'm going to confess, I did about a 10-second internet search. And one of the first results I found was this headline: 5 online personal finance communities that will help you get better with money. And I thought, maybe that's something that could be helpful if you're a person struggling financially. Let's see what kind of communities they are. And I read through the list of 5. This is from CNBC. And one stood out to me. Number 3, something called Bravely. And they had me at the first sentence. Bravely is a community that gives self-identified women the financial tools to bridge the gap between their dreams and their realities. And I thought, here's somebody who understands the embrace life mentality. Do you see what it says there? The gap. We talked about the tension between opposites last night. Their dreams, where you would want to be, the comfortable level you want to be financially. And your reality is, I can't even pay the bills. And it's using those tools, particularly for the community of women. And then I began to read a little bit, and I became pretty enthralled with this founder and financial feminist. I'd never heard that term before. So I learned something new in a 10-second search. It's a lady named Kara Perez. She hosts free money chats on the company's Instagram and so on and so forth. She teaches economics. And I love this end part. It says Perez breaks down what she calls feminist economics and makes personal finance inclusive, connecting topics like the racial and gender wealth gap to what individuals can do to negotiate their salary or begin building wealth. And then the Bravely website has an array of free resources, budgeting guide, how to align your spending with your values. I thought that was really, really interesting. Now, here's somebody who had a passion for finance and wanted to teach people about finance. But in a way, she's starting her own movement. She's dealing with an underserved community, the racial and gender wealth gap. So she's taking something she's good at and that she finds joy in. And now she's built this really interesting, really new community to serve people who haven't had their needs met. I thought, what a great example of building community around something you're passionate about and doing some good while you're at it. Well, we've been talking a lot in the last couple of examples about activism, and I want to show a slightly different example. What if we were to talk about something like classic films? Okay, that seems rather innocuous, right? Classic films. Now, there are certainly some topics around racial inequity and some horrible things Hollywood has done, the sexual abuse that's happened in Hollywood. There's certainly a lot of angles for advocacy and activism around classic films. But in this particular example, we're just going to think about the fact that we like them. We're going to surgically remove any potential for activism, okay? And just pretend we like classic films, and what are we going to do about it? So they've announced, okay, it's such and such a time, such and such a place, no more COVID restriction, take your mask off, everybody go out and have the time of your life. You know, it's Woodstock 2021, you know, everybody's out having fun. So we decide what we're going to do is we're going to go on Meetup and we're going to search. Again, this took me 10 seconds. I went on to Meetup and said, look, what if I'm in Los Angeles and I'm a big fan of classic movies? And then I saw this come up. There's 1,216 members of this group, all based on TCM, Turner Classic Movies, so it's kind of redundant, the Classic Movie Fan Club in Los Angeles. And you see this thing and you think, yeah, look at that. That lady has such a nice smile, and look at the dog. I mean, how can you resist that dog and the sunglasses? Yeah, we're going to go check this out. We're going to hang out with the Classic Movie Fan Club just for fun. Or maybe we went over here, and did you know Airbnb has experiences, not just places to stay, but in each town, they have experiences that you can get involved in. And I said, maybe I want to explore Hollywood. And I found this little one. He's a filmmaker, and he focused on the history of culture of film as an industry and an art film. He takes you to the best known site as well as some obscure off-beaten path, telling the stories of Hollywood and talking about Hollywood history, filmmaking, movies. So here we go. Here's a community. Here's something we could plug into if that were our thing. We could really see a different side of Hollywood. So why do I bring all of this up? This little frivolous example of, hey, I like movies. Because there's more than one way to make an impact. In our little movie example, we weren't starting a movement, although we could and probably should or could, but that wasn't our example. But how can we make an impact just by enjoying something we enjoy? Well, to the surprise of no one, I have a little story about it. I was staying in San Diego and I had a friend come to me and say, hey, Curtis, a person I knew a little bit, but not real well. I said, hey, Curtis, have you ever heard of kava? I said, no, I've never. And he just really enjoyed kava. And he wanted me to experience what kava was like. And if you don't know, it's from what I understand, it's a South American juice-like drink that's made of, I think, some roots and things. It's really interesting, and it has kind of an earthy taste. Well, there happened to be a place, a real funky, neat, artsy place that served kava, and we walked. It was about a 10, 15-minute walk to the place. We got our kava juice and sipped it and walked back. He shared with me on the way there his passion for eating healthy. And this is the reason he liked kava, because it was a natural way to calm his nerves and all these things he's telling me about. Went and got the kava. By the time we came back, he was telling me about some of the deeper things in his life, some of the things he's concerned about, some of the things he struggles with. And by the end of that first walk, we knew we were going to be friends for a very, very long time. We didn't start a movement that day, but we started a relationship. We started a friendship, and it continues to this day. We're able to be there for each other when we need each other, and we share our joy and share our pain. And that beautiful relationship came out of kava juice. So as you go and participate in these various activities, it doesn't mean that you don't make an impact. For the relationships that you form are going to end up being your impact. You don't necessarily have to be an activist. You just have to have awareness. Then, of course, there was the other example that we used. But here's this lady who had a real talent for finance and had a passion for women's rights and for reaching out to marginalized communities. And she used her passion to build a movement. But I promise you, on the way to building that movement, I bet you she had to build a lot of relationships. So I think the two are related. You have to do both. So here's the bottom line. How do you know? Do I want to start a movement? Am I just going to go hang out with the classic movie fan club? What do I got going on here? What do I do? Well, the reason I went to great pains to review everything we've gone over so far is because I want us to use it to help us find our mission. And that's the last point in OOF, to find your mission. Well, I'm going to have you do one more little exercise with me. If you would, please take a look at this photo. And if you can, go over to your chat box and give me a reaction. What do you think of when you see this picture? Are there any words that come to mind when you see that picture? Standing firm and confident in oneself. Very good. I always think about that poem that's written on the side of by, I believe her name's Emma Lazarus. Lazarus. Give me, you're tired, you're poor, you're yearning to be free. I always think of that poem when I see this. I never knew that they lit the Statue of Liberty at night. Yeah, who knew? But that now I have to go and see it. I've never seen it at night, and I really would like to now that I see that. Freedom, strength, justice, liberty. Yeah. Thank you all. Those are wonderful reflections. You see, we built that thing, or we, when it was gifted to us from France, we put it out on Ellis Island and as a gateway to the world, holding up that light, saying, "Give me, you're tired, you're poor." And you know what happens in this country when we forgot about that? We've gone through a real dark time as a country, forgetting what that's about. It reminds me when I see it of both sides of our history, how we are a nation of immigrants because we waged a war against the indigenous people that were here. And it also reminds me of the good side of America, that we are a diverse nation made up of people from all over. It's what's wonderful and good about this nation. We would do well to remember the Statue of Liberty. And every time we look at it, it's going to evoke some sort of emotion or feeling about this country and what it stands for. It is quite literally a beacon. So when we get lost in the tumult of the world, when things get chaotic and crazy, when budgets baffle and when relationships ruin us and when everything comes at us at once, we need a beacon. We need something to remind us who we are and what we stand for. And I'm going to tell you, we need to have a mission. We need to have a mission statement as to what we're about. I'm going to have you take a look, or I'm sorry, as you think about everything we've gone through, we've talked about your hopes and dreams, your potential, what you really want to, the kind of person you want to be. We've talked about your reality, how some of it may not be as rosy as we'd like. We've talked about finding our joy. We've talked about healing our pain. And we have all these things swimming around in our heads now. How do we bring them all together? Our beacon, our mission. Let me give you some examples. This was Jane Goodall's mission statement. Her mission statement said, "My mission is to create a world where we can live in harmony with nature." Now, that's a pretty aspirational goal. When I show you mine, it's not going to be as lofty, I promise you that. That was a lofty goal. But you know what? She did it. In the late 50s, early 60s, she traveled and where was it? I believe she was in Africa, and she was studying the chimpanzees and all the great apes, and she was learning so much about how humans developed a lot of their behavior and how we got it from a lot of our ancestors. Well, she didn't stop there. She went on to advocate for women's rights. She went on to be very active in the realm of climate change and trying to stop the terror that is climate change. And you can almost see her going through these phases of her life. When she looks back and says, yep, this is what I need to do. I need to go to Africa. For my mission is to create a world where we can live in harmony with nature. Well, maybe you're like me and you're not quite as ambitious as Jane Goodall, right? Let me show you my first mantra, my first mission statement was this: leave the place better than I found it. That was my mission statement for a long time. Like if I'm in this hostel or this city or in this group or in this relationship or in this family, I'm going to try to just leave these things a little better than I found it. And I found that throughout my life, when I always went back to that center point, leave the place better than I found it. Curtis, what are you doing here? What are you doing with your life right now? I'm trying to leave this better than I found it. And then that began to evolve a little bit, and I reworded my mission statement, about 5, 7, 10 years ago, something like that. So this is what I changed it to: find out what's awesome about me so I can help you find out what's awesome about you. And if you read into that statement, and this is really my mission statement, and really I think about it a lot. When you look at this mission statement, you can see the first part that says, find out what's awesome about me. It talks about my pain. I had a lot of trouble accepting myself and loving myself. So that was part of my mission statement. I really wanted to start to like myself again, right? But there was a mission to liking myself again. I wanted to like myself again so I could find out, to help other people find out that they're awesome too. And you know what I find out? The more I remember those big red X's that interrupted the circle that blocks us from doing things. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm so glad I made that decision. I'm so glad I started that process of finding out what's good about me, because the more I like myself, the more confidence I get. The more awesome experience I have meeting other people and helping other people with things they struggle with. And sometimes it's their self-esteem that they struggle with. And I'm able to tell my story to them and help them along their journey. So now it's your turn. And this will be your doctoral dissertation, right? This will be your final mini project to graduate the Embrace Life project. I want you to think about coming up with your own personal mission statement. It can include your pain. It can include your joy. It can include your potential. It can include your reality. Whatever you want it to be, there are no rules. So as you go through, as you leave this class and continue on with the rest of your life, think about that. What is it what am I here for? What am I up to? What am I doing? And if you can, write it down on a card for a while until you have it memorized. Put it on a card, stick it in your pocket or in your purse or in the wallet. Take it out every once in a while and take a look at it and look around you and see, am I working on that mission? What am I working on today? Am I working on that mission? Well, one more story, and then we'll be all done with the Embrace Life project for now. I'm going to tell you this last story. So, probably about a month and a half ago or so, some of the restrictions were starting to be lifted in California. And they allowed, in San Diego area, they allowed people to start going out to restaurants again. And it was the first time I had walked in. I was going to pick up a to-go order because I didn't know that eating in was a thing. I just had come by to pick up my food. I walked into the restaurant and saw all these people sitting in there. And I stood there for a second in shock, like, should I call a hotline? Like, what's going on in here? Is this, like, it almost seemed illegal for some reason, like, this is wrong. Why are people doing this? And I was panicked for a minute, but then as I was waiting for my food, I kind of looked around. And there was about half the people who were sitting in there with like this gaze of wonder on their faces, like, this is so awesome. I can't believe I'm out. And like they're having an animated conversation with the other folks at the table. And they're all like, drinking their coffee and telling their stories. And it gave you such a good feeling. But then there were a few. I saw one couple in particular that was very upset. They were waiting for their food that hadn't come out yet. And you could just read in their body language and everything that they were just having a miserable time. And there was about 2 or 3 tables of people that you could really look on their face and see that the magic had been broken already. That here we have this fantastic opportunity to be around each other, to share our joys and our sorrows with each other. And that moment had already passed them by without so much a moment of gratitude for it. And I don't want that to happen to us. That's why I came up with the Embrace Life Project, because I wanted us to really take a moment and consider who we are before we go out, and how we connect to each other before we go out and back into society again. Because I don't want us to lose it this time. I want us to, for as long as we can, keep the gratitude of connection that we've missed so much for this 1.5 years. Thank you so very much for being a part of the Embrace Life Project. And may we learn to embrace life together. Thank you very much. Visit ucccme.org/ELP and keep up with all the things that you can watch the previous webinars, and we'll announce any upcoming events on there as well. And if you enjoyed this presentation, got something out of it, and we encourage you to donate to the ELP if you can.